In the quiet kitchens and living rooms of American homes during the 1970s, families placed coins in jars and tucked bills into passbooks, trusting that their savings will hold steady. Yet, over time, the money seemed to stretch less, and the weekly grocery trip felt subtly different each month. What was happening beneath the surface of daily life? How did households perceive a world where prices crept upward, almost imperceptibly, shaping routines and expectations? History shows that these small shifts often went unnoticed at first, experienced in the folding of a paycheck, the cost of a gallon of milk, or the occasional surprise at the gas pump. This period invites reflection on how ordinary households moved through economic change, navigating the ebb and flow of purchasing power while carrying on with familiar rhythms, unaware of the patterns quietly unfolding around them. The 1970s in the United States presented an economic landscape that was both familiar and subtly shifting. Suburban streets were lined with modest homes. Families went about their routines, and the middle class largely felt secure in their expectations of stability. Yet, behind this sense of normalcy, the economy was quietly evolving. Prices for everyday goods, groceries, gasoline, household supplies, were gradually rising. It was not a sudden shock, but a slow and steady change, almost like water slowly filling a basin, noticed more in the cumulative effect than in any single moment. Households often measure their economic confidence through routines: the weekly shopping trip, the monthly paycheck, the careful balancing of household budgets. Inflation was not discussed in headlines with urgency, but observed in subtle ways: the slightly higher bill at the grocery store, the steady climb at the gas pump, or the growing curiosity about interest rates at the local bank. Middle-class families largely interpreted these changes as part of ordinary life, continuing with expectations shaped by past experience. Savings remained central to household planning, yet the reality of purchasing power shifted quietly beneath familiar patterns. In kitchens and living rooms across the nation, families were learning, without perhaps realizing it, how economic currents could touch daily life. Their experience would form a human story of this decade, a narrative of adjustment, observation, and the slow rhythm of economic change shaping ordinary lives. History shows that when prices rise gradually over time, certain patterns in household behavior begin to emerge. Middle-class families in the 1970s often noticed that savings, though carefully preserved, did not stretch as far as before. Research indicates that when inflation proceeds slowly, households adjust subtly, often through small changes in spending and priorities rather than abrupt shifts. Savings accounts remained a familiar anchor, yet the way money was used began to change. Families might delay a new appliance purchase, select a different brand at the grocery store, or reconsider discretionary spending. Patterns suggest that these adjustments were not made out of fear, but from observation. Prices creeping upward over months, budgets quietly recalibrated, and the ledger of daily life reflecting gradual change. Economic behavior also followed broader cycles. History shows that periods of steady inflation tend to produce recurring household strategies: a careful eye on cash flow, a comparison of prices, or a deeper attention to the value of each dollar. Bank visits, ledger keeping, and conversations over the kitchen table became small rituals reflecting these patterns. Through these everyday behaviors, the middle class navigated shifts in purchasing power. There was no sudden recognition, only the slow accumulation of awareness. In observing these patterns, one gains insight into how households experience economic reality, not as statistics, but as a rhythm of daily life, subtle, repeated, and quietly instructive in understanding the relationship between savings and prices. As the 1970s progressed, households began to recognize in small ways that their savings were not stretching as they once had. These turning points were not dramatic or sudden, but gradual moments of understanding: a slightly larger grocery bill, the surprise, a higher utility charge, or a conversation at the bank about interest rates. Families did not panic. They simply adjusted expectations, observing the slow ebb of purchasing power and incorporating it into daily life. Adjustments were subtle. Households might shift spending slightly, prioritize essential items, or monitor budgets with increased attention. Confidence in long-term savings remained, yet was quietly tempered by experience. Shopping routines, meal planning, and small financial decisions reflected a growing awareness of ongoing economic patterns. Research indicates that such turning points often occur when repeated observation leads to recognition. Families began to notice that the same amount of money purchased less over time, leading to reflective decision-making in routine activities. Patterns in daily life. Weekly trips to the grocery store, monthly budget reviews, or discussions with neighbors serve as informal guides in navigating these shifts. Over time, this slow, measured awareness shaped household behavior. The process was gradual and reflective, showing how ordinary families integrate economic experience into the fabric of daily life. In the quiet rhythm of small adjustments, households demonstrated an enduring capacity to perceive patterns, absorb change, and continue routines without disruption, offering a window into how middle-class Americans experience inflation firsthand. Looking back, the experience of middle-class households in the 1970s reveals how slowly changing economic conditions shape everyday life. Families adjusted spending patterns, savings expectations, and routines, observing the gradual shift in what their dollars could purchase. History shows that these adjustments were not abrupt or alarming, but reflected a natural response to a changing environment. Modern households, more than 50 years later, may notice parallels in the way daily budgets, grocery shopping, and household planning interact with the broader economy. While the context differs, the concept of purchasing power remains central. The amount of goods and services a household can acquire with a given amount of money. Observing how families in the 1970s navigated slow shifts can offer perspective on the continuity of these experiences across decades. Households in both eras focus on stability, balancing routine expenditures, monitoring familiar prices, and quietly adjusting priorities. Patterns suggest that awareness grows gradually, through observation rather than instruction. In kitchens and living rooms, the unfolding of economic change is felt in ordinary decisions: which items to place in a cart, how to organize a weekly budget, and the rhythm of income and expenses over time. By considering the experience of previous generations, it becomes possible to appreciate the interplay between economic patterns and household life. These reflections illuminate how ordinary families carry on with familiar routines, while adapting subtly to changing conditions. The human experience of inflation, in both historical and modern contexts, is less about crisis and more about the quiet, continuous understanding of value, stability, and the rhythm of daily life. Understanding historical patterns offers a form of perspective that is quietly reassuring. Observing how middle-class families in the 1970s experienced inflation provides insight into the subtle ways households perceive and respond to change. History shows that awareness develops gradually, and that familiarity with cycles and trends can reduce confusion, not by altering circumstances, but by clarifying how events unfold over time. Patterns in household behavior reveal consistency. Families monitoring expenses, comparing prices, and adjusting routines as they notice small shifts in purchasing power. Recognizing these patterns allows one to see economic experiences as part of a broader system, rather than as isolated events. The middle-class experience of the 1970s illustrates that knowledge of these patterns can illuminate why certain behaviors emerge and how ordinary life continues alongside change. Observing systems over decades highlights the continuity in human response. Families adjusted thoughtfully, reflected on small shifts, and carried on with daily routines. This understanding is valuable not because it directs action, but because it reduces uncertainty. Awareness transforms subtle economic dynamics from abstract numbers into relatable experiences: grocery trips, household budgets, and the quiet management of savings. Through studying history, one gains clarity on the patterns that shape financial life. Insight into recurring trends fosters a calm, measured perspective, emphasizing observation and comprehension over control. The narrative of middle-class households in the 1970s serves as a guide to understanding the rhythms of economic change, demonstrating how ordinary families live, notice, and adapt within the steady currents of history. The story of middle-class savings in the 1970s unfolds quietly in kitchens at grocery stores and across suburban streets. Families engage in ordinary routines while the value of money shifted subtly beneath the surface. The experience was measured, reflective, and continuous, a pattern of observation and adaptation rather than sudden upheaval. Looking across decades, it becomes clear that economic patterns move in rhythms that households naturally respond to. The middle class of the 1970s noticed gradual changes in prices and purchasing power, quietly integrating these observations into their daily lives. The process was neither urgent nor alarming, but human. Families organized budgets, adjusted shopping habits, and preserved routines as economies slowly evolved. Reflecting on this period offers perspective on the nature of economic experience itself. Understanding the past allows one to see the ways ordinary households perceive, adapt to, and live alongside shifts in value. History provides context, transforming abstract ideas into relatable stories of daily life. The journey of families through gradual inflation is not a tale of crisis, but a testament to human observation and continuity. In the end, the narrative of the 1970s is a reminder that patterns unfold over time, quietly shaping household experience. By appreciating these rhythms, one gains insight into both history and the ongoing story of everyday life, informed by reflection rather than prediction and understanding rather than instruction.